Hey guys, David Clayton here with GuitarBreakdown.com, and today we are going to do another jazz quick licks. This is a series of quick licks we're going to do based off of George Benson, and this comes from Guitar Techniques magazine, the March 2013 issue, and I suggest you picking that up if you want. There's the whole magazine's amazing. I've talked about this each time we do these licks. I just love the magazine. They do a really good job putting it together, and their jazz section is always really great. Now, this section on George Benson, again in the March 2013 issue of Guitar Techniques magazine, is there's about 20 licks, and we're going to break down like 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 of them, but I think 5 of them. We've already done one. This is the second one, and this one, you know, we're going to walk note for note through this whole thing like we do everything. It's a real quick 2-measure thing, I think. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit of theory. This one really doesn't have a lot of theory to talk about, but we will discuss what's going on so that, you know, besides getting a cool lick out of this, you could actually understand it and incorporate it into your own playing. 2 things I want to touch on. I am using this Ibanez jazz guitar. I still have the little paper underneath the bridge here. This is straight out of the box, and I'm going to do a series of interview type, actually a whole lesson package on guitar setup and all that kind of stuff with a really talented guitar luthier here in Los Angeles. His name's Greg Bach, and he works on some of the top guys' guitars out here. He has been for years and years. We'll talk more about him and what he's all about in the future. Hopefully that's coming soon at the beginning of the year, and he's actually building us a custom guitar, which is going to be amazing. Again, he's awesome. He's just amazing. But he's going to show you how to set up everything straight out of the box, what to look for in guitars when you pull them off the shelf from Guitar Center or something like that, and how to spice them up just a little bit with, you know, inexpensive little quick fixes that will make your guitar sound so much better. Anyway, with that said, I also want to point out the cabinet I'm using. I'm using a brand new speaker cabinet from Bob Burt. It's an amazing cabinet. We did a review on the Bob Burt Allen Hines AH1 distortion pedal recently, so check that out too. I'll put a link to that in the description. But this cabinet we're going to do a review on. It's awesome. It's hand built. Bob builds the most amazing cabinets and speaker enclosures and amp head enclosures, and he's just an amazing woodworker, and of course he makes an amazing pedal, which we did a review on. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. This 212 cabinet is fantastic. I've had it for about a week and a half, and I can't stop playing through it. So we will do a review on that, and we'll talk more about all that stuff later. But now let's just dive into this lick. All right, like we mentioned earlier, we're just going to walk through note for note what's going on here like we always do. And we'll touch a little bit on theory later. There's not really that much, but there's enough theory to talk about so that at least you can understand what's going on here, and then, you know, that kind of helps you explore with this and understand what you can do with it and how you can incorporate it into your own playing. This idea has, there are a few trademark things that George Benson does. There's trademark things that every player does, but as far as George Benson goes, I always associated the use of chord stabs, like we talked about in the first lick that we transcribed, and it's going to be something we talk about with several of the ideas that we explore in this magazine article, because he really uses that heavily. In between lead lines, he'll throw little chord stabs in there, and it's just really a great way of improvising solos and stuff. So the second thing he does that I always associate with his playing is the use of octaves, and he does them so fast. He'll do what most people will do, real fast single note lines. He'll do these octaves, and it just sounds so amazing. It's really challenging, but it's really great technique. The last thing I associate with his playing, or one of the last things, is the use of double stops. He does this really cool bluesy double stop thing a lot of the times, and it's just really tasteful, and that's what he's doing here. So basically, again, this is a 2-5-1 in the key of D. It's starting actually on the, not to talk too much theory right now, but it's starting on the F major 7 chord. And then it goes to an E minor 7 flat 5, to an A7 chord, to a D minor chord. So you have And then it goes back to that E minor 7, flat 5, to A7, D. So at the very beginning is just starting out with that F major, and then it goes to the 2-5. All right. Now this very beginning lick is starting using a D blues scale over that F major 7 chord. Now if you think of that, I guess we're talking a little theory now. I'll try and stick to just the note for note thing. But if you think of that, it's using the relative minor of F major. So it's almost, so it's basically using F major pentatonic, but it's using D blues scale. All right, so now the lick starts out with your pinky on the 10th fret of the E string. You play that once. Then you play both the 8th fret of the B string and the 10th fret of the E string at the same time. And you hammer on that blues note, the flat 5, which is the 9th fret of the B string. So you're hammering on from the 8 to 9 on the B string while also letting the 10th fret of the E string ring out. So you have, then you just walk down the scale from the 8th fret of the B string to the 10th fret of the G string and the 7th fret of the G string. So you have, and then it ends on that 8th fret of the B string twice. So the whole thing is, and now it switches from the D blues scale to the G minor pentatonic, or the G blues scale, and you do, so the whole thing is, and that's just, again, the double stop thing where you play both the notes together. You play the B string of the 10th fret, the 8th fret, B string 8th fret with your pinky, first finger on the 5th fret of the G string, and you just do a trill from the 5th, 6th, back to the 5th on the G string. Then you walk down the scale on the D string from the 8th fret to the 5th fret to the 8th fret of the A string. So it's, then it just pivots from that, goes back up to the 5th fret of the D string to the 8th fret of the A string, back to the 5th fret of the D string. So you're just pivoting off those two notes. And then it slides from the 6th fret to the 7th fret of the D string. So the whole thing is, now, one thing to take note of, again, I talked about this in the earlier quick lick George Benson lesson. The tablature on this was different from actually what the recording was. What the recording was, he did this walk down on the G blues scale. He pivots from the D string and the A string. While in the tablature, and again, the tablature was different than the actual music notation, the standard notation, because the standard notation was this. It was actually correct from what the recording was, but the tablature was, which really sounds cool too. Right? But they're two different things. So just experiment with playing those two different ways, and again, always be conscious of what's actually written to what's being recorded, or experiment with your own things. All right, so that whole thing is, and now it gets into this really cool little fast pentatonic run with chromatic notes mixed in. You could think of this as A minor pentatonic, right, on the 5th fret. So you're running up 2 notes per string, on the A string, 5th to 7th fret, then 5-7 on the D string, then 5-7 on the G string, 5-8 on the B string, and then it does a little turnaround where it does the 8th fret on the E string. So you have, then it starts walking down 3 notes per string. So that 8th fret goes from 8, 6, 5. This is where it's adding some more scale tones. So at first it's pentatonics. Then it just walks down 3 notes per string, 8, 6, 5 on both the E and the B string. Then it incorporates chromatic notes from 7, 6, 5 on the G string. So far you have, then it does a 4-note pattern on the D string from the 9th, 8th, 7th, and 6th. Right, so the whole thing is, then it does this little chromatic pivoting movement that's real typical in jazz, where it goes, right, really typical kind of thing to do. So when you walk down chromatically and you end up on that 6th fret of the D string, you go to the 7th fret of the A string, then to the 5th fret of the D string. So the whole thing is, then it does 4 notes on the A string from the 8th fret, 7, 6, 5, to 2 notes on the A string, or the E string, which are the 8th fret to the 5th fret, which is your pentatonic, you know, first E string pentatonic stuff. So the whole thing is, and that's the end of the phrase. Now we'll get into a little bit of theory, and I'll show you some techniques to kind of help you get through that really fast chromatic run.